Paul Gascoigne began his career with Newcastle United, but within a few years he was in London at Spurs and a hot prospect for the England squad. Seen from the press box, he had the makings of a soccer messiah. Behind the scenes, his teammates feared for his sanity.
The clamour in the press of him, how good he was and what he could do for England, and the pressure was kind of growing and growing and growing, and every time he got out on that pitch, you thought, well, I've got to live up to this pressure, but he could. That was the thing. He had the skills to do it. He had it from all sorts of angles, not just the sporting angle, the personal angle. Everyone's expectation was on this lad called Gazza, and you could sense that he found it obviously very difficult.
With his attention deficit problems and impulsive behaviour, he was a press relations nightmare. Hacks were appalled at his lack of decorum or sense of occasion.
Say hello to Noah then, No. Only joke.
No, it's a joke. Silly joke.
I don't think he actually ever looked further than the next 60 seconds in what he was doing or thinking. It was just, impulsive.
All too soon, Gascoigne was on the front pages as well as the back. The press turned on him, an icon gone bad.
I think we as journalists expected too much of him. We expected this magnificent talent on the field to lead England to glory, and off it we expected this mature individual that was capable of handling everything with quality, dignity and class. And with Paul Gascoigne, that wasn't the package.
His obsessive-compulsive disorder had him in agonies over the slightest adverse comment.
He hated criticism from the journalists. And that one article, that one sentence, possibly the one word, would bug him. He's just one of these sort of people that couldn't switch off. If there were switches in Gaza, you'd be like Battersea Power Station. There'd be so many switches, it'd be unbelievable. He'd have to switch everything off because everything would affect him, and everything did affect him.
By the mid-90s, the honeymoon of Gaza mania was over. Gascoigne told friends he felt hunted, and the only place he felt safe was out on the pitch.
When you're on this bit of grass, you take your mind away from everything. The only worst thing is after the match is finished, you've got it all to come again.
For the normal player, it was that 90 minutes on there that was the pressure. But we could relax the other 22 and a half hours of the day. Him, I think, it was the complete opposite.
I think his major demons really were away from football, or away from the football fraternity. But what could have made it easier for him, from the press perspective, is if a football match lasted 24 hours. Every day.
Oh, that's a good little ball.
In 1991, this reckless tackle left Paul Gascoigne crippled with a torn knee ligament. It placed him in grave danger. It wasn't that this specific injury had ended many a career, or that Lazio, the Roman club who were about to buy him, might reconsider. The peril came from the fact that for an indefinite period, Gascoigne would have nothing to do but recover. In 1991, Gascoigne threw himself into physiotherapy. After surgery, his punishing exercise schedule got him fit and helped suppress the anxiety that came with obsessive-compulsive disorder.
One of the things that people with anxiety states, OCD and related conditions often do, is they seek solace in exercise. Physically, exercise gives you a great buzz. It's a brilliant thing. It's a brilliant coping mechanism for many anxiety disorders.
As his career progressed, there were more injuries and longer recovery. Those who knew him injured at Middlesbrough saw him losing the battle to depression and alcohol.
The biggest problem Gaz has ever had in his career, it's when he's injured. When he's injured, he's a nightmare.
When he has an injury, that is it. He always goes down the Swanee then. When he's down and he's injured, that's when his drinking really hits full flow.
And Gascoigne was often injured. He had a broken leg when Tony Dorigo met him at Middlesbrough.
I popped into the players' lounge and he was actually there on his own, having a drink or two, and I sat down alongside him and we were talking away, but I'm not sure his mind was even in the room, to be perfectly honest. He was, twitching away and just seemed to have, I think it was mounting on him. You could see that he needed some serious, help and guidance.
I think if you look at Paul's OCD on its own, it's a condition where the sufferer will try and find their own ways of dealing with it. And drinking, alcohol, that's a very, very common way that anxiety sufferers deal with their anxiety.
15, please.
The drink really got a grip on Paul Gascoigne when he came home from Italy in 1990 and found the nation in the midst of Gazamania. There were interviews, endorsements, a pop song. Gascoigne retreated to Tyneside and the safety of his father's drinking club. He was home and away.
I think it scared him. He wanted to rewind the clock. He wanted to turn the clock back, I think. I think he wanted to be like it was before. He wanted to go out with his mates and be normal. That's why he ran away so often to Dunstan, to the club up there that his dad was a member of and his mates were a member of. Members only, no one could get in. He knew everybody there.
He felt safe in the Excelsior club, sharing a culture of heavy drinking. It was in his genes.
That's fucking doing the snake's fucking petty.
Patrick Barclay recalls a press dinner at which the drunken star took the microphone to reveal the roots of his problem.
Sure, it's meant figuratively, but he got up and he described himself as a hereditary alcoholic, and I think that was a reference to basically the fact that his background is drinking.
John liked to drink, that's the dad. I didn't drink with him, I never saw him drinking, but the general thoughts were that John liked to drink, whether any of that rubbed off.
From early on, the press were aware of his problem, but couldn't actually name it. At a time when football and drink were indivisible, Gascoigne was one amongst many.
Gaza was part of a drinking culture in football anyway, so as long as players in those days could then go out and perform and could then play and play well, then I think that was all the players were concerned about, and that was all the management were concerned about at the time. If they did it on the pitch on a Saturday, then they couldn't be doing much wrong during the week. I think a lot of his friends and even his managers over the years, they didn't understand his drink problem.
I knew he had a drink, and I knew sometimes he drank too much, but I wouldn't know whether he had a huge drink problem. And if I did, I don't suppose I'd tell you.
It wasn't just drink. Gascoigne's compulsions led to excess in other areas as well.
He's a binger, whether it's eating, whether it's smoking, whether it's drinking, he's a binger.
Since childhood, Gascoigne had battled to control his weight. At Spurs, he learned a dark secret that might have seemed like an answer. Tony Adams knew what could follow an eating binge.
I think the world record for eating a bowl of rice pudding was about 2 seconds. He tried to eat it as quickly as is possible, and then he would obviously go and sick it up.
If he liked something, then he would eat it, and eat a lot of it as well. But then he would go to the toilet as well and make himself sick and get rid of it all because he was paranoid about his weight. And he used to weigh himself and he used to have the weight checks by the doctors and things like this. And he would literally make himself sick before. He would do it on a quite regular basis, which is not good.
Paul's life, I don't believe, has been, any of the things he's done has been a conscious decision to do this. I don't think it's a situation whereby Paul, an hour before he does anything says, well, I'm going to go to McDonald's, I'm going to do this, then I'll just go and make myself sick. He doesn't do that at all. I believe that it's all spontaneous with him.
But you know what? We've been getting a lot of stick over the last week because of England's greatest number 8, Paul Gascoigne. And apparently, according to everybody now, in the press and in the media generally, on the television, etc., he's not allowed to have a good time anymore.
In 1998, when the press were already asking if Gascoigne was fit to represent his country in the World Cup, he was photographed with Chris Evans out on the town, carousing and eating unsuitable foods. With little thought for the consequences, he sent up his problems on national television.
He's been surrounded by terrible influences. When a guy's friends, when he's got a drink problem, when a guy's friends take him out drinking, famous friends, what kind of friends are they?
Go on, show me yours.
Gascoigne's band of Newcastle friends were the most constant presence, but perhaps they knew him and where he came from too well to see his addictions as problems that needed solutions.
Last thing you want to do if you're involved with Paul Gascoigne is upset Paul Gascoigne. When you are, I use the word ill, I've been there, been sick, you're very volatile. If people upset you, you just go, well, F you, I'll go and find someone else. And that's why I think people just let him get on with what he was doing.
He was always in charge of the group that he was with. They did what he wanted to do. They did everything that he wanted him to do. He needed somebody to stand up to him.
Paul John Gascoigne and Cheryl Fales. You are now man and wife together.
Gascoigne paid the highest price of all when his mental problems distanced him from the one person who might have saved him. The relationship and subsequent marriage to Cheryl Fales lasted 7 years, but it seemed doomed from the outset.
Paul, best wishes to you.
Cheers. The dynamic of Paul's marriage to Cheryl has always been a difficult one, an interesting one, an intriguing one, if you like. There are those who believe that Cheryl has done very well out of the marriage, shall we put it that way, financially, and doubtless that's true. But there are other ways in which she's been quite good for Paul. When he's been at his lowest ebb, she has been willing to try and help him. She was the one who first got him into the Priory for some treatment for his depression. So it's been a difficult time for her, and in return she had to suffer being beaten by Paul.
Fueled by drink, violence was a factor from the start of the relationship. 4 months after they were married, it culminated in a beating so savage that Cheryl was paraded for the cameras with bruises and broken fingers.
Alcohol is a really big precipitant of domestic violence. Here you have someone who's charged up, who's tense anyway. Alcohol, you know, can serve to be the catalyst. You've got somebody whose attention span is, in a way, greatly impaired. People with impaired attention span, people who are disinhibited, they will strike out, sometimes without thinking.
The marriage would ultimately end in divorce, a fact that Paul has never found easy to accept.
If he could turn anything round, it would be to be with Cheryl, no doubt that. I honestly think he drinks on that today. I honestly think he does.
As the marriage ended, he began to fall apart. When Glenn Hoddle dropped him from the England 1998 World Cup squad, he praised the midfielder's doomed attempts to get fit, but glossed over his depression and binge drinking. Gascoigne returned to his job at Middlesbrough. Paul Merson was his housemate and watched him going under.
We'd get on the train in the morning, and some mornings he'd be sitting there drinking a bottle of red wine and having a fag on the way to training. Him and my brother every day would, you know, get a couple of bottles of red wine from the local, and they'd sit there and drink them and take sleeping tablets and see who could stay awake the longest. Competition.
Merson was renowned for his multiple addictions, but even he was shocked when another of Gascoigne's came to the fore.
He had everything in a brown leather Dr. Dolittle bag. It was full of pills, full of everything. I remember one day my mate talks about it now. He'd never seen my mate in his life. And when he come in, he went, "Marzipan, this, that," you know. And my mate still talks about it. He says, "I can't remember that time, Gazzo. He'd never seen me in his life. He was offering me this, that, every pill you can think of."
While at Middlesbrough, Gascoigne began the cycle of rehabilitation and relapse that have marked his decline. In 2000, a move to Everton looked like a last chance. Manager Walter Smith was shocked by the changes in the star he'd last seen at Rangers 2 years earlier.
He would turn up, you know, in the morning, kind of slovenly, you know, not his normal sort of bouncy self. He looked down. I spoke to the club doctor and asked him, you know, what kind of problem could it be? And he mentioned to me that it could be a problem with alcohol. And I had to confront him with that. And I think he himself had an idea that it was serious. You know, because once we had had our initial chat, and he admitted it quite freely.
Smith sent Gascoigne to dry out at an American clinic. When he returned, Ian Ridley got an exclusive.
I interviewed him and I said, "Did you acknowledge while you were there that you were an alcoholic?" And he said, "Yes, I had to." I think since then there have been occasions when he's doubted it, but I suspect deep down he still recognises that is at the root of all his problems.
That Gascoigne had a drink problem was hardly news, but now he was admitting it. By 2003, however, he was away to China and back in denial.
Are you alcoholic? No, I'm not alcoholic, no. It's okay. You quit? No, I don't quit. I just said when I go out at night, sometimes I have the odd glasses of wine. But like years ago, I didn't used to be in control of it, but now, you know, especially over the last 3 years, I've been in control of it. You know, I have a meal and I have a couple of glasses of wine, and that's it.